Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I want to talk about a book that I read, one that is about immigration, a somewhat normal topic, although there is nothing normal about the immigration system in place in the United States, especially for Latinos and Hispanic Americans, or outside Hispanic individuals. So today I will be talking about Children of the Land by Marcello Hernandez Castillo. It is a memoir, and I got it from my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. For those who don't know, Marcello Hernandez Castillo is a poet, primarily known for writing poetry all throughout America. He immigrated to the United States when he was a child, and judging by this book, he does not have good memories of his time in Mexico. Or of his time in America. He has done a lot of activism work, particularly making it so that a lot of the poetry awards in America are able to be given to undocumented immigrants as well as Americans, showing that there's really no difference between, undocumented or documented, as long as, you're writing poetry. So, it's pretty weird to put citizenship requirements on American poetry awards because you're an American if you're in America. That's my view at least. And so he's done a lot of activism work, and he's written 3 books, which include this and the 2 other books that he wrote in 2018. So this book actually came out in 2020, fairly new. It's a pretty good book. I think I might recommend it. I might not. At the end of the video, I'll talk about why. This video is going to be a bit unusual because it is a memoir. It's harder to analyze memoirs, but I will do my best. Because it came out recently, I'm going to not really spoil it so much. I'll talk about near to the end, but I won't talk about what happens at the end. I might talk about some spoilers in the analysis section, so just be aware of that. And so without further ado, let's talk about this book. I will do a summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So Children of the Land, of course, focuses on Marcello Hernandez, as he is known in the story. He is an immigrant living in California and also the Midwest at times because of his college. He goes to a college program in Michigan, I believe. The story starts in sort of in the middle of everything when he's visited by immigrations and custom enforcement ICE agents. They visit him and they ask where his father is, but they tell the ICE agents that his father was deported years ago and he hasn't been back in touch with them. Despite the fact that the ICE agents aren't here for them, they still feel some fear because they aren't legal citizens of the United States. So there's a little fear and anxiety knowing that they're being watched by ICE agents now, and they can't really go forward as their life once was. The story then flashes forward to when after Marcello gets his DACA status, which is the deferred action for something. It's an immigrant thing. So I'll put it up here. But he gets his DACA status and he decides to fly back to Mexico to visit his father, who he hasn't seen in 10 years. And along the way, he feels a lot of anxiety. He goes through his memories, which aren't really positive of his father because his father was abusive to him and also his mother. And there's a lot of questions about, why his father was the way he was, and a lot of mystery because they haven't seen each other in those 10 years. And so once he gets to his dad's house, there's a lot of frustrations there, mainly Marcello wondering why his dad isn't doing more to become an American citizen or even come back in the country. Is there something wrong with Marcello and the rest of his family that he's not willing to reconnect with the family in something more than a telephone call or letters. Later, Marcello has a green card interview because he marries a girl named Ruby, and she applies for a green card on his behalf. And he manages to go through the interview process pretty successfully, although they do ask very detailed questions. And he passes. Unfortunately, the green card is lost in the mail, so that he has to go through the process of like filling out forms for them to send him another one. He experiences a lot of bad feelings the whole time. He starts drinking more than he already was, and he feels a lot of survivor's guilt. Why does he get it when like so many other people who need it more aren't getting the green card or help with immigration that they need? Marcello then visits Mexico again at this point because he has his green card, and he manages to convince his father to go through the interview process because 10 years have passed since he was deported, and he can finally try to become an American again. However, unfortunately, his father is rejected for immigration because of his run-ins with the law where he was deported in the past. And at this point, Marcello's mom, Ama, announces that she plans to return because since her husband isn't coming back to America anytime soon, she wants to be with him, which the son does question because, again, they didn't really seem like they were in love. And Appa was also like abusive towards her, so why would she want to return when she was able to escape? But she does announce that she's going to do that, and the family does make a last-ditch effort to try to get her protected status because she was involved in an accident years ago with a drunk driver, and because of that, because she testified to the police, she is able to get some protection for a potential future citizenship. But it turns out too much time has passed, and the law enforcement agents don't want to drag up history, which is their way of possibly being racist. But it doesn't go through, and Ama decides to return back to Mexico, where she has somewhat of a good time, although at that point in the story, Ama calls back to Marcello on the phone and announces that Appa has been kidnapped by members of the cartel. And the rest of the story is a rush to figure out what's what and try to make sure his mom gets citizenship because she doesn't want to be kidnapped by the cartel too. And I'll let you figure out what else happens in the story, as I'm not going to spoil that part here. In terms of analysis, there is a little bit to talk about with this story, although it is very weird to talk about, an analysis when you're talking about someone's life, because often people's real lives don't meet certain patterns. But Marcello does provide us with some food for thought in this story. One idea that keeps coming up throughout this story is how Marcello doesn't really seem to have a place to call home. Allow me to read you a quote from this. "Part of me hated the U.S. I hated what it had done to my family. But maybe Mexico would have done the same thing. I hated the suburbs, the college frat brothers who demanded an A for their C work in my class. I hated the evenly squared tiles in the grocery store, the way people looked at me when I left the building, and yet where else was there for me to go, for us to go? What other choice did we have when America forced us to come and a return to Mexico was no longer an option? I hated the beauty, but nonetheless, there was beauty." And it really shows the frustration that Marcello is dealing with throughout this story, the anguish that he's feeling, really, because he doesn't seem to have a place to call home. He moved away from Mexico when he was too young to really remember it, and he moved to America, and there was a promise of safety and security in America that he never really experienced, possibly because of his trouble with his family. But there was this constant worry about being deported, about being seen as not normal in America because he was Mexican. And because of that, he didn't really have a home in America, too. And later on, he did try to return to Mexico when he visited his father, but he didn't recognize it anymore. He had been gone away for too long to really notice or recognize any of his family members or any of the local townspeople who apparently knew about him. So because there's no Mexico or America, where do you belong to? And I really like that idea that he brings up, that, for some immigrants, maybe there is no home because America's not very welcoming, and you're trying to escape whatever you were dealing with in the country you came from in the past. And building up on all of that is the broken family home that Marcello is coming from, because his parents didn't really offer that much of love for him. His mom seemed kind of distant, and his father was abusive towards the children, and also his mother. And so, he didn't have that connection that other families seem to have. And so if you don't have a country and you don't have people to belong to, what do you have? And throughout the story, we see that Marcello believes he has nothing, which leads him to spiral into depression, anxiety, substance use. He starts drinking quite a bit, and it really seems to have a negative impact on his life. And so I think what Marcello is trying to get at is that you need those people, you need that country of origin, or it's always going to be feeling as though there's a piece missing from you, and that's probably not good for your hierarchy of needs. Your self growth and your development. You need to have that feeling of belonging to somewhere. Another interesting idea that Marcello discusses, he touches upon, it's not necessarily new, but it is, it is interesting how he talks about it, is the hell of bureaucracy. Other authors have talked about bureaucracy before, but Marcello illustrates how broken the immigration system is, how much it just sucks, and how much it screws over immigrants and people applying to immigrate to the United States. He has to go through countless interviews, fill out so many forms, and refill out forms when something gets lost. And he's sent around to multiple people, and he has to keep going to to the holiday, or it's a specific hotel in near the border. He has to keep going there, and eventually they ask him if he wants to be part of their rewards plan because he spends so much time there. And it's like all of this work just to be a citizen, all of this work just to not live under the fear of being caught and deported. It seems like a lot, and it adds to the stress and anxiety. There's another interesting quote that I would like to read to you. The sheriff, the DA, and the judge applied a narrow definition of suffering onto Amma and made it impossible for her to fit the mold. But it wasn't just them. The whole law was flawed. The U-Visa law told women like my mother how they should suffer and provided a checklist for correcting forms of suffering. And right there you get at one aspect of this hellish bureaucracy, which is quantifying suffering, quantifying how much you deserve to be an immigrant. Amma has to go through all of these just to prove that she went through pain, and that pain was enough to enable her to become a citizen down the road. But it's completely ignoring the fact that she testified that she did something that she didn't have to do, which put her, her identity and her life at risk in order to put someone in jail, which is what the law wanted. But they only cared about how much suffering and how much that impacted her in the future. And all of this bureaucracy, what it does is it quantifies pain and how much you want to be an American citizen. And it essentially eliminates the human aspect of all of this, that all of these people are coming to America to escape the terrors of their home country, often which was caused by America in the first place. And when you eliminate the human factor, it makes it so easy to reject people. And maybe that's what it's designed for. It's built to fail. It's built to make it hard to immigrate because perhaps America doesn't want all of these people to actually immigrate. And I think Marcello touches upon that briefly in the story, which I think is great on his part, getting at the hidden truth of the immigration system, which is it's not really designed for immigration. It's designed to weed out a whole bunch of people and only let a select few immigrate into the country. But if you're financing terrorism overseas and in different countries and making life miserable for people in Latin America, you should at least take responsibility and let those people immigrate when the time comes that they want to. And it's not happening. So I think Marcello is seeing the curtain pulled back, and it's very ugly to him, and it leads to that despair that he's feeling. And the other question is it even worth being a citizen at this point? If you have to jump through all of these hoops, and if you're constantly made to feel like an outsider, is it even worth going through this process? And Marcello, he argues at some point, no, he wants to throw away his green card. He wants to be done with it because he's alienated so much, and he's put through so many hoops that it no longer feels good to him anymore. He's just constantly exposed to that suffering, and it doesn't feel good for him. So as much as I like those themes that Marcello touches upon, I do think this story can be overly dramatic at times. That's one of the flaws with this story. I know it's a very serious subject, but you can tell it's written by a poet because of how dramatic it is. Marcello writes like a goth teenager at times, just overly brooding, and making the story darker than I think it actually needs to be. Although maybe that's just, a personal complaint about it, and maybe I'm sort of understating the importance of painting the immigration system as grim, because it is in fact grim. So maybe I just didn't like his writing style, but I understood that it was dark and it needed to be dark, I guess. Another aspect of the story that is really weird is how Freudian it seems to be. Freud wrote about the Oedipus complex, which is the idea that men love their mother to the point where they want to sleep with them, and they hate their fathers to the point where they want to kill them, based on the story of, Oedipus Rex or whatnot. And it really seems like in this story that Marcello has a serious Oedipus complex, where he is very, partial towards his mother, much to the point where he obsesses about her and he focuses on her, and it really seems like he wants to sleep with his own mother. And related to that, he also is really aggressive towards his father, and maybe that's deservedly earned because his father was abusive and is a pretty harsh person to get along with. But the anger that he feels towards his father is misdirected, and it should be directed toward the immigration system, a fact he probably doesn't realize until towards the end of the story. But it's really weird how Freudian this is. And I wouldn't say this and call it out. I know this is one of the weirder aspects of any review that I've done, unless it was blatantly there. As I was reading this, I was like, this is just really weird and uncomfortable. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe I'm not understanding enough about Mexican culture, but also I do understand a little bit about Mexican culture, and he's very just weird about his mother and his dad, and maybe that's some unspoken trauma that he hasn't actually addressed yet, or who knows. But it's pretty unusual, and I realize I'm saying all of this about a real human who actually exists, so please don't send this video to Marcello Hernandez Castillo, because he will not be happy with what I have to say about that. So I don't know. It just seems obsessively Freudian at times. And I'm saying this is someone who does not agree with everything that Sigmund Freud said. I'm less partial to psychoanalysis. Given my degree in psychology, I'm much more partial to environmental and personal relationships with people who aren't your mother and father as being more influential. So that's I guess such an interesting fact about me, but it's just a bizarre thing that I had to note in this story. Otherwise, maybe you'll see it if you read it, maybe you won't. Maybe I'm just forcing some weird thing onto the story that isn't actually there. In which case, you can ignore everything that I'm saying right now. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Children of the Land by Marcello Hernandez Castillo. A pretty interesting book, one that I enjoyed, but I don't know if I can recommend it because of how overly dramatic it is at times, how very dark it is, and it's just this book isn't for everyone. And I guess like it wasn't for me personally. I don't think. I guess I wouldn't recommend it, but I do think that there are some people out there who might enjoy it more than I did. So I'm not going to say it's a bad book. I'm just going to say different taste out there. So if you read this before, or you simply want to comment on my review, do so below. I would love to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about Children of the Land. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Marcello Hernandez Castillo. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and immigration-y travels. Farewell.